Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Satchell, the CEO of Learning Technologies Group. My colleague here is Neil Elton, the Finance Director. We're going to canter through what's normally about an hour's presentation to institutional investors to say a little bit more about what we do. We've been on the market now for about 28 months. We did a reverse takeover when we came to AIM in November 2013. And I wouldn't normally start a presentation with a mission statement, but I think it is important to ask you to hold this thought in your minds because it will give you an idea of how we have progressed through the business in the last 28 months. So please bear in mind that what we are trying to do with that phrase is take learning to a different level of decision making in large corporates and government. It has hitherto been very much a job for the HR department or the Learning and Development department to deal with the development of their workforce. We focus only on adult workplace learners, not on children in schools, okay? But we are trying strategically to place those decisions at the heart of the organisation. So, give you a bit of an idea of the company. The original stub company, if you like, was a privately held business owned by myself and our chairman, Andrew Brodie. If any of you are investors in a company called RWS Group, which is a patent translation business, it's done very well on AIM in the last 10 years, then you will know Andrew Brodie, who is its chairman and single largest shareholder. He also is the same in our organisation, and we were able to purchase this company back in 2008. We turned it around. It's a company called Epic down in Brighton, and we chose to bring it to the market in 2013. Now, there's a specific reason for that. At that time, we were trying to decide whether we would exit the business or whether we would go further in terms of trying to consolidate the industry. We decided on doing the latter. I'm very pleased we did. But we decided for a particular reason. We exist in a highly fragmented industry. It's very strange, actually, when you look at the topology of the industry, that you've got about 3,000 e-learning companies in Europe alone. And there seems to be a glass ceiling about where these companies can grow to. They're mostly founder-owner managed, and they seem to hit a stumbling block at around about the 5 to certainly to 10 million revenue level. And we felt that there was a great opportunity, given the global nature of business these days and the sort of assignments that we were taking on, that organisations would want to deal with a larger organisation with greater substance and scale. So we decided to go about creating one of those, and that's how we formed Learning Technologies Group. You may ask, why did we choose the public company route rather than private equity? Simple reason. Very often we are looking in our acquisitions at management teams that really matter to us to come on the journey with the group. And we felt that the perceived liquidity of being involved in an AIM-listed public company was more attractive than a private equity situation where they knew they would have to wait for an exit when the private equity partner chose to do so. I probably don't need to labour this point, but just to reaffirm and just reassure you, we do exist in a high growth sector. There's no doubt that we enjoy very strong structural tailwinds. You probably will accept that we are learning more and more every day through a digital medium, and that could be as informal or casual as learning how to tie a tie on YouTube or change a tyre in that very casual, informal way. It could be peer-to-peer learning when we go onto a bulletin board and say, I can't get my Skybox to work, how do I do that? Or it could be something much more formal and structured. But I have to say the advent of the mobile device and the tablet back in 2010-11 made an absolutely fantastic difference to our business, in that finally learning became that thing that you could do at a very convenient time in your own place and of your own choosing. And we found that changed the whole situation at the same time as a rather interesting coincidence. Because the recession hit budgets, unsurprisingly training budgets, so hard, it also reduced the amount of classroom and face-to-face training that was taking place. And because of that, we found that a lot of organisations transferred their learning to digital, to e-learning as it's known, and thankfully they've not converted back ever since the recession. So across the world, there are different growth rates, of course, but we are enjoying a very high structural growth market. I've talked a lot about acquisitions already, and I just want to reaffirm that actually what drives the business is a very strong fundamental business philosophy. We are proud of the margins that we deliver. You'll see them when Neil talks to you about the financial results in a moment. One of the things that we had to do, which I think is fundamental to this whole story, is that back in 2008 we acquired a business that had hitherto been very profitable. It was the grandfather of the industry, and the margins had dropped dramatically. We worked hard to rebuild that business and put it back from a 45% gross margin to a 60% gross margin. And in doing so, we learned a lot about the processes that we could put in place and overlay those onto other businesses. And we're doing that successfully in every acquisition that we make. So we are seeing a big gain in the gross margin and hence the EBITDA margin that the business is making. And to give you some idea of the client profile, we are working for very large organisations. Ranging from the BBC and British Airways through to the UK government, Jaguar Land Rover, many organisations that have unique, specific training requirements that they need to have built for them to deliver to their staff. And you'll be astonished at the plethora and the diversity of those. So, as we build the group, in particular, we're looking at three particular aspects. And we ask ourselves three questions, and those are those three boxes: capability, sector, and geography. The first one, you'll see from the list on the left, we're rather proud of the fact that we have built a substantial and broad capability in the last 2.5 years. We're able to provide organisations with all of their learning content, irrespective of the device it works on. We're able to also provide virtual reality and augmented reality. We naturally consult with our clients on the overall solution that they require, and you'll find very often that an organisation needs to track what its learners have done, both from a compliance perspective and also from a general learning management perspective. So we also provide that service. And finally, we're doing an awful lot of what I call sort of product refresh type training. So as organisations, be it in the luxury goods sector like Burberry or Dunhill, or indeed in the automotive sector like Jaguar Land Rover and Volvo, refresh their products and come out with new product lines, they have an enormous training requirement, normally complex because it has to be localised to many countries around the world. And we handle that for them from start to finish. So when Jaguar Land Rover release a new vehicle, we are actually delivering that learning across the globe at different times. The cars have different specifications in different markets, and all of that is handled by our delivery platform onto mobile devices. It really is quite a complex undertaking and something that commands a premium price. In terms of what we're trying to do now, we're looking at what services we don't have that we need to augment to the group. And those are the areas that we're looking at making acquisitions. And you'll see that we've already made 4 acquisitions, which I'll describe in a moment. And for those services, we're particularly targeted about wanting to buy what I would call high-quality, best-of-breed businesses in their sector. And we're lucky enough that we now have such a profile in our industry that we're able to go out and make approaches to those organisations that are reasonably well received on many occasions. So on the right, you'll see a list of the sort of areas that we're looking at making acquisitions in. I won't give you any more specific details, obviously, but it is fair to say that we are very much continuing on our buy and build strategy, and the growth is by no means over yet. Probably the area that will give you most indication of where we're focused is in vertical sector specialisation. We are, by default, a generalist. We are able to take on any learning assignment that an organisation has, and we borrow the subject matter expertise from the organisation themselves, or sometimes from external experts. What we're looking to do, and we've done it very successfully in one of our recent acquisitions in the financial services sector, is to actually have greater vertical sector specialisation. And you'll see there that we're particularly interested in the pharmaceuticals and health market, the energy, aviation, and retail sectors, where we think that those sectors demand the sort of vertical sector understanding, that deep understanding that can deliver better results. And finally, we're not a global business yet. We're a partially international business. We have ambitions to be a fully international business, never I would call a truly global business, but we have a nascent North American presence. We opened a business over in New York, and that's grown substantially over the last 3 years from a standing start and is very profitable now. We have a joint venture in Brazil that's been around for the last 5 years, which has grown in a stuttering way. We only own half of that and don't have quite the same controls over it, but it's a useful Latin American presence. We have a very strong presence in Europe, and we have a gap in the Far East, which we will look to fill over the next couple of years. But we recognise that we need to grow more in North America. Let's talk to you a bit more about the financial results that we're achieving.
This slide shows the results for the last 3 calendar years. We announced our audited results in the week before last, so these are fairly current. At the top there, we've got the revenue. 3 columns, it's worth going through it year by year. In 2013, that was the original business which Jonathan referred to as Epic, which generated revenues of £7.6 million. In 2014, we acquired 2 further companies, Line in April of the year and Preloaded in May. And you'll see there the incremental revenue that they brought to the business during that year. In 2015, we acquired a company called Uclea in July, and that represents the incremental revenue of 2.5 million to generate 19.9 million for the year as a whole. In terms of EBITDA growth, again, that's been an impressive story in the last year. You'll see back in 2013, Epic was a very profitable business, generating 19% EBITDA margins. In 2014, they dropped down to 14%. This was primarily off the back of the acquisition of Line, which was generating much lower gross margins. They were generating gross margins of about 45%, whereas Epic had been generating gross margins of about 60%. And during the course of that year, we got Line's margins back up to those of Epic's level. So by the end of 2014, those gross margins were much improved. So the increase to 21% in 2015, that was one of the main reasons for it. We also identified a number of synergies as a result of the acquisition of Line and the merger with Epic, which Jonathan will explain about a little bit more. Preloaded was also a very profitable business, and just general economies of scale led to very impressive EBITDA growth of more than 100% year on year. That all manifested itself in earnings per share. So again, we were profitable in 2015, our first year of profit after tax, and again, a limited share issue as a result of Uclea acquisition during the year. In terms of dividend, we paid a maiden dividend at the end of 2014 of 0.03 pence per share. In 2015, we have just announced a proposed dividend of 0.1 pence per share. So again, full year dividend, that will be a 50% year-on-year increase payable on the 4th of July. And again, cash was very strong. We finished the year well ahead of market expectations at £7.3 million worth of cash, and very, very strong cash flow conversion. We generated 4.5 million cash on 4.3 million EBITDA. The second slide is just a summary of the acquisitions we have carried out. In the case of Line, which was the acquisition we made in April 2013, you'll see we paid £9 million for that. There was no deferred consideration in that instance. In the case of Preloaded, we acquired that in May, and again, you'll see there down at the bottom there's a deferred consideration of up to £3.4 million. You may, if you look at our ticker, see that we paid out a deferred consideration of about £500,000 last week in shares. And there's about £500,000 left to run, and that earn-out runs out until 2018. And this is all based on very aggressive revenue growth targets. So we're more than happy to pay these out. Uclea, which was acquired last year, they have an earn-out period which runs from 2016 to 2017 with a maximum capped earn-out of £3.5 million. And we raised £7.5 million in a placing to do the Uclea acquisition. We had raised £8 million in a placing to do the Line and Preloaded acquisitions in the year before. And then this year, so after the year-end results, we acquired a company called Rustasea in Nashville in Tennessee, $26 million in consideration with up to a further $11 million in deferred consideration. Again, the earn-out period 2016 through to 2018, and again, based on very aggressive revenue growth targets to achieve that. At the same time, we also took an investment, a 27% investment in a company called Watershed, also based in Nashville, and that was for a $3 million investment.
Just going to spend a few moments talking to you about the various subsidiary companies. Leo, you might think that's a name that's just arrived, and we've been talking about Line and Epic. It is actually the merged entity of Line and Epic. And it's perhaps worth saying that the Line acquisition is not an exemplar acquisition, in that it is the only one that we bought with the full intention of merging it with one of our other businesses, i.e. Epic, because they did very similar things and we wanted to bulk up in the market. Every other business that we've acquired since has become a separate operating sister company. So Leo creates custom e-learning solutions for large corporates and government. And if you are aware of the stock, you'll be aware of the fact that in mid-December we announced a very large government contract in partnership with KPMG, which has had a fairly major effect on the share price. That's a 3-year contract, and the revenues that we believe will accrue from that are pretty significant, and we described that as transformational. The organisation that we created out of the group from our own software, if you like, the one competition that we have other than people who do directly what we do is organisations choosing to bring it in-house and do it themselves. And I applaud that, because for the lower level stuff that we do, it's more appropriate for an organisation to internalise that. To do so is quite challenging for them, because no one expects a learning experience now to be a PowerPoint slide. They want something that's much more interactive and engaging. And the problem with that is, how do they create that works across multiple devices, iPhones, iPads, tablets, and of course still PCs and laptops. That's a challenging thing to do technically, and we have used our back-end technology to productize it and create a learning tool called Gomo. We did this for 2 reasons. One, because we wanted to be part of this market, but also because we wanted to have exposure to a recurring revenue stream, and Gomo is sold on a SaaS-based license subscription type process, and therefore delivers recurring revenues for us. And this is growing very nicely. We're now seeing revenues and renewal rates that are in the high 80s to 90%. It's been around for about 2.5 years, and we are diminishing the investment we're making in the product now, because it's becoming reasonably mature, although we're still adding new features all the time. So we've got high hopes what that's going to do for us over the next couple of years. A business that we bought in 2014 is a learning games business that had focused hitherto on the education market. It's called Preloaded. It had done an awful lot of work in North America for Rupert Murdoch's digital education business called Amplify. And we've taken it into the corporate sector and a number of other sectors. Notably, last year we did a very large contract with McDonald's. If you happen to go into McDonald's and buy Happy Meals with your children or grandchildren, then you will find that there's a call to action on that on the Happy Meal box that invites you to play learning games, and you download them to your device in the restaurant, or indeed when you leave, and you'll be playing games with the movie characters that are part of the McDonald's, whatever movie that the McDonald's Happy Meal is promoting at the time. And all of those games are built by Preloaded. Again, a very complex operation, not only building the game, but delivering localized content into 38 different European markets at the appropriate time. And we have to literally parachute in one movie character and then take them out when the license expires. Not an easy thing to do. That gives you characterizes the sort of work that the group is asked to do because of our expertise in these sort of matters. I mentioned vertical sector specialisation being important to us. In summer of last year, we acquired Uclair, a business based just down the road in Cannon Street. They are governance, risk and compliance specialists in the city, but they're at the higher end, the sort of complex financial crime end of the problem. So not just anti-money laundering and bribery and corruption and know your client. They are in the more complex end of learning delivery, both here and in the US. And that's a business that's growing particularly quickly. And delivers a combination of what we call blended learning in terms of instructor-led training and a number of digital learning interventions alongside some generic product that gives a recurring revenue stream. And then I want to come on to the most recent acquisition we've made, which brings us back to the beginning of the presentation where I said moving learning to the heart of business strategy. I want you just for a moment to think about the revolution that the digital marketing industry went through 10 years ago, where all of a sudden it was capable, because of the web, of measuring the effectiveness of marketing campaigns. So you could finally say, yes, people clicked through to that email, they didn't to that one, they came to our website and bought something because they tracked through from somewhere else. And you can get this full picture of what your customers or prospective customers are doing. And that has been truly profound to the marketing industry. I believe that the learning industry is about to go through the same disruption. Finally, we are going to be able to say that learning intervention to that group of staff in your organisation caused them to be more effective. It is affected directly and has a correlation with the performance of your organisation. And very quickly, because I'm aware that time is running out, Rustasy is what I would call the expert plumber of the industry. It puts the software in place to the international industry standards that has the hooks for the data so that we know about what the learner has done. And then an organisation that we made an investment, and also enjoys, by the way, very strong recurring revenue streams. So it's a highly profitable business in its own right. It's the best margin business we have in the group. And then we also made an investment in Watershed, which takes that data from a separate bucket of data and correlates it with other data within the organisation. Let me give a couple of examples of how it works. In an HMRC call centre, for instance, we can track what the call centre operators have learnt about a new piece of VAT legislation and correlate that with the call performance on their CRM system. So we can see whether those learners who have a greater knowledge, supposedly, are giving a greater customer service and therefore a better customer outcome to that call. And we shouldn't be frightened of the fact that we might prove that our learning isn't working, because I think it's better to measure something and know and adjust accordingly than not know in the first place. I'll give you a slightly more profound example in closing. We are working with a Midwestern health authority in the States at the moment that has trained paramedics on a new specific treatment for cardiac arrest. We know that learner has gone through that process because we track them. And then on the other side, of course, we have very specific data about 911 call comes in, ambulance dispatched, paramedic deals with patient with cardiac arrest, patient lives or dies. We know that stuff. That's absolute data that's available. You correlate the two, which we're beginning to do, and it's not statistically relevant enough yet, but we believe that we will be able to show a direct correlation between the performance and the outcome on the patient and the people who have learned this new technique. That starts to get really very interesting in a health situation or in business. And that is the differentiation that we are trying to achieve in Learning Technologies Group at the moment. There are many organisations that make fantastic learning content all over the globe. We're doing two things. We're consolidating them. We're doing that profitably and appropriately, but we're also trying to add some very specific and exciting new services that harmonise and gel the group together to deliver one-off service to organisations of the ilk that you see there that want to buy provable, verifiable learning results. Thank you very much.
Questions, anybody? Oh, must be some hands somewhere. Well, I'll start off with some. What's your market cap out of interest?
We're about 155 million, I think, now. And in November 13, when we did the reverse, our imputed market cap, I don't think we ever quite got down to it, but it was 16 million. So there's been some phenomenal growth in 28 months.
Obviously, you've made some quite big acquisitions on the way.
We have. We've raised £15.5 million in fundraisers, yeah.
And you've got quite a bit of cash left at the moment.
Well, we do throw off a lot of the cash, yeah. Although we should mention that we actually raised debt for the first time at the end of January when we made the acquisition of Rustasy. So okay. we now have $20 million worth of debt on the balance sheet as well, which obviously made the acquisition of $4 million-ish of EBITDA very EPS enhancing, but we do have some debt.
And obviously you're making acquisitions. Are there things in the pipeline? Obviously you can't say anything today, but say over the next 6 months, are you like to have made an acquisition over the next 6 months or 12 months or 24 months?
I think that constitutes a forecast, doesn't it?
What does your broker say?
We are a buy and build business, so I think it would be highly unlikely that we wouldn't be looking at things at any time. We also have to be aware that we've made 4 acquisitions in effectively about 2 years, just over 2 years. I would say 3 of those are very well bedded down. Our most recent acquisition in Nashville, the Rusty acquisition, is truly an independent business, but it still has an effect on senior management bandwidth, and we're very aware of that. We're very lucky to have a very strong board. Our chairman has done a lot of acquisitions in his time. Our deputy chairman is Harry Hill, who grew Countrywide. He probably bought more estate agents over his time than we've all had hot dinners. So, we get a lot of really good sage advice about how to do this properly. And yes, we're still on the acquisition trail, but we will be very cautious and mindful of doing it properly.
But you're obviously hoping for organic growth from existing businesses, not just through the acquisition trail.
Absolutely. We're not hoping for that. We focus on that. Perhaps I didn't say it specifically, but our acquisition strategy is there to augment what should be the fundamentals of the business. So we really focus on driving strong top-line growth. We're not nonchalant, but we're confident about the margins we can deliver from that. We deal with very large organisations, so whilst they might push out terms, we don't find cash conversion difficult. We don't have bad debt, for instance, to speak of. So the fundamentals of the business work well, and we focus on those, and then we try and augment that and if you like, turbocharge that performance by making specific infill acquisitions.
It's your chance to do a bit of selling. Why should somebody invest in you today? I don't normally ask this question, do I? But I thought you've got quite a very good story, and you've got cash, and you've got income, and you've got dividends, which is a fantastic thing to see. Is now, would you say, is it a good time to buy, do you think?
It's
always a good time to buy.
I always try and demur on these questions because, I think I've given you a story, I hope a very realistic, conservative view of our business, rather than just trying to hype it or pump it. We know we're on a high rating. We haven't tried to achieve that rating. We're very realistic about that. So every time I look at the price and think that our rating is at the upper end, we seem to announce a piece of news that takes us further forward. We're very focused on EPS. So we won't do anything that is gratuitously dilutive. And I think we have a very strong board that advises us well about how to run the business. So there's a lot to like. And I believe, again, you've said all your disclaimers, I've not found any business that's publicly quoted on any of the main markets that is doing what we're doing. Now, we're either mad and crazy and run away from our stock as quickly as you can, or we're doing something that's really quite interesting in trying to consolidate this industry. There are lots of small players. There are no mainstream large players. We're not a large player yet. We're going to be somewhere north of 30 million revenue in 2016. But we will get there. We've set a goal of getting to £50 million worth of revenue as quickly as we can. We will recalibrate ourselves when we get close to that goal and set a new one. I think it's pretty interesting doing something that's consolidating this industry.
Neil, over to you.
Jonathan, great presentation, thank you. I just wanted, slightly analogous to that question that's just been asked, what are the characteristics that limit a lot of these smaller players to 5 or 10 million pounds of turnover, or dollars, I can't remember what it was, and what is it that you bring to it, and how can you transcend that and take it forward to a new paradigm?
I've asked myself that question so many times, and this is a slightly vague answer, I apologise. I think it's mainly because in the learning business, the barriers to entry are quite low. What I find is you normally have cerebral thinkers, learning psychologists, someone with a teaching or some form of learning connotation to their background, okay? Not and that doesn't necessarily sit well with someone who's going to drive the growth of the business very hard and think about P&L and margins and so on. I am a non-learning professional, a self-confessed one. So I'm looking at those people, and I think what they do is they get to a point whereby they've probably done lovely, given great service to customers and grown to sort of 30 or 40 people, and then literally you've got to go through that growing up stage of putting in a management team and running the business in a more structured way. And I think a lot of them flounder at that point. Some are scared of doing so and choose to constrain the size of their business. And we love those ones best of all because we can just see this business that's desperate to break free. And it is constrained by a natural instinct of their owner manager, and we can just release that. There may be other reasons, but
one gentleman just there.
Hello, hi. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question regarding your dividend policy. You've been paying dividends for the last 2 years only, 0.1 pence and 0.15 pence, so growth of 50%. From here on in, now that you've got 3 of your 4 acquisitions embedded down, you've talked about the earnings growth, but could you enlighten us as to where you see your dividends growing to and where they're likely to stabilise, please? Thank you.
Yeah. So we obviously we realise we're not a sort of a high-yielding stock, and that's not the goal. I don't think that would be compatible with a buy and build strategy at the moment, especially if we're continuing to do fundraising and therefore we're diluting the shareholder base, but we're paying out a large dividend. That would seem inappropriate to me. The dividend is there to demonstrate that this is a business that is achieving strong earnings, and we are paying out a modest percentage of those in a dividend. but we can achieve very significant growth in that dividend year on year if we are achieving a commensurate growth with the EBITDA. And our goal is that we are going to continue to see the sort of trend of growth in our EBITDA that we've seen so far without giving you a forecast. If we see that trend, then you will find that our dividend policy will continue to be progressive. And what you might want to do also is just look again, get a read across from our chairman on this, because you will see a very progressive dividend policy at RWS Group if any of you are investors in that business.
And thank you for the forecast. Thank you very much indeed, both of you. Thank you.